Hey, students, Mr. Kirk here. Was feeling a little festive today. Um, we are going to look at Virginia state government today, SOL 7, but we're actually not going to start with 7A. We're going to start with 7B. This is an introduction to Virginia state government. Um, the first thing I'd like to talk about is actually SOL 7B, the relationship between state government and national government, or otherwise known as federalism. Before I get into the real notes, I just want to review some old vocabulary. Some of these words, or all these words you've seen before, but we need to know the difference between federal and state. Federalism, this is the most important one, is power that's divided between the national and the state governments. We talked about this one before. Remember, we used the three-layer federalism cake to show that concept. The other review definition that's really important is separation of powers, because we have separation of powers at the state government and the federal government level. Separation of powers is dividing government power between three different branches: legislative, executive, and judicial. Okay. Now, these next two definitions are actually federal government powers. The first one is the expressed powers. By the way, these are both legislative powers. Express powers are federal powers specifically listed in the Constitution. These are ones like declare war, the power to coin money, and things like that. Now, the implied powers, which is also a review definition, are the powers used to carry out express powers, but implied powers are not listed in the Constitution. Okay? Pause it right now if you did not get these vocabulary definitions. That way you can get them now. Okay, let's move on to our next slide. All right, so these are all new definitions. The first one is a reserve power. Reserve powers are powers reserved to the states by the 10th Amendment. I included that as part of the definition. Now, the 10th Amendment to the Constitution, this is actually the last amendment within the Bill of Rights. Basically, the 10th Amendment created the reserve powers and said any power not granted to the federal government is reserved to the state governments and the people, or the people and the state governments. That is why they are called reserve powers. Now, the final kind of power we want to talk about today are the concurrent powers. Concurrent powers are shared by both federal and state government. These are powers shared, or that both can do, like taxes or law enforcement, things like that. So pause the video now if you need to get these definitions, and then we'll move on. All right, let's move on. So again, a review of the concept of federalism. Okay. Our U.S. Constitution establishes a form of government. The form of the federal, or our federal form of government, is supreme. It's over all other levels, and that's why federal government's at the top of our federalism cake. The powers that are not given to the national government by the U.S. Constitution are actually reserved for the states. And this is the 10th Amendment again. Okay? So again, the 10th Amendment gave the state governments their powers. So powers given to the states are known as reserved. These are the main points, okay? Powers that belong to the federal government are known as expressed or delegated powers. And the system that allows the state and the national government to share power, this is called federalism. All right, let's move on. The U.S. Constitution gives certain rights to both federal government and state government, right? And powers that are shared between the two different levels of government are known as concurrent powers. Concurrent powers. The concurrent powers, again, I just wrote this in, so if you wanted to kind of summarize it, is concurrent powers are shared by both the feds and state governments. All right, so let's look at some of the primary responsibilities of the federal government versus the state government before we actually get into the three branches of the state government. National government has the power to conduct foreign trade and also regulate trade between the different of the 50 states. They can regulate commerce. That means regulate business and provide for the common defense. That would be the military, the Army, the Marines, the Air Force, the Navy. Now, at the state government level, their review is quite different. Sorry about that. I was having some tech issues there, and my laptop decided to just shut down completely. So I had to get everything loaded back up, and now we're going to continue. State government has completely different powers than national government, but our state government, basically what they want to do is promote public health, safety, and welfare. And almost all the laws and things that state government does falls into one of those three things: public health, safety, or welfare. Now, the final point I wanted to make about kind of the relationship between state and federal government is tension exists when federal mandates require state action, but they don't give us any money to do that. We call that adequate funding. This creates tension where the states may not want to do what the federal government tells them to do. And this happens all the time. Okay, let's move on. This slide right here, you can pause it, and I'm going to review little pieces of it. Shows some of the powers of the federal government, some of the powers of the state government, and then some of the concurrent powers in the middle. So for the national government, they can declare war, maintain an army, regulate foreign trade, admit new states, the post office, coin money, and our foreign policy. Anything in the blue are powers that only the federal government can do. Now, the state government, on the other hand, they establish and maintain our schools, what we're doing right now. It establishes our local governments. They regulate business within our state. For us, that would be Virginia. They make marriage laws and offer and issue marriage license. That means states also handle birth certificates, death certificates, and all that kind of stuff. And then the state basically can assume powers not delegated to the national government. That comes from the 10th Amendment. Anything not given to the federal is reserved for the states, whether it's written or not. All right. In the middle, right here, you'll find the concurrent powers. Okay. The concurrent powers are also known as shared, and that is maintain law and order, levy taxes, so both governments can create taxes, create banks, and establish our court system. That's everything I need you to know about the relationship between federal and state government, okay, for this year.